A kegyelmezés jogkör mindközül talán a legérzékenyebb, mert egy ember életéről kell dönteni. A kegyelmi kérvény és a rendelkezésre álló
That is the sound of a president resigning.
áprilisban abban a
Katalin
hiszemben
Novak,
a kegyelmi
Hungary's first female president, stepped down last Saturday, admitting that she had made a mistake when she granted a presidential pardon to the deputy director of a state orphanage who had been convicted for his part in covering up the sexual abuse of children at the institution. Since then, Hungary's president, Viktor Orbán, has lost another key political ally to the scandal, his justice minister, Judit Varga, in what is widely viewed as his biggest challenge in 14 years of uninterrupted rule by his Fidesz party. With Orbán's annual State of the Nation address looming, I spoke to our Budapest correspondent, Stefan Boss, about the scandal and its wider political ramifications.
Well, what we do know at this point is that Hungary's first female and actually youngest ever president, Katalin Novak, stepped down, and also a former justice minister resigned. Because what they did was they granted the presidential pardon, among others, to this man. He has been identified as Andrei K. He was convicted and jailed for being an accomplice in pedophile crimes. He was jailed for persuading children to withdraw their testimony against the director of the orphanage for sexual abuse. And he was also one of about 25 people who were pardoned by the president during a visit by Pope Francis last year. But interesting enough, his name only became public knowledge this month. Now, obviously, this issue has become deeply problematic for the government because it has made protecting children and traditional family values the cornerstone of its policies. And the President Katalin Novak herself was also a former family affairs minister.
Well, indeed. Stefan, I remember you profiling her, in fact, in the context of our Women of Europe special.
Yes, indeed. I profiled her, and she said in that interview, actually, which we were broadcasting, that she finds it very important for women to have more children and also to take families more seriously. And she made a case for traditional families.
I'm a mother of 3 children, so I'm not only a woman president, but also a mom. And I think these two can go hand in hand with each other, even if it's not easy.
Right, okay, so we can see why the Hungarian President Novak, had to resign, because this is a scandal which is, of course, very much off-brand. She, however, is not the only political casualty in this scandal, Stefan, I believe.
No, indeed, because it's quite interesting that there is another powerful woman. Her name is Judit Varga. She was Minister of Justice at the time of the pardon and countersigned the clemency decision. So she had hoped to lead the ruling Fidesz party in the upcoming European elections. But of course, when this scandal came out, she was basically forced to rethink that, and she has now resigned from parliament and will no longer be leading the ruling Fidesz party for the upcoming European elections. So it goes really very deep in the Fidesz party, and people are very concerned about what will happen next.
What kind of differences were there between these two women? Were they similar kinds of politician?
I would say that while President Novak tried to unite the nation behind Orbán's policies in her more, I would say, soft-spoken style, Varga echoed the Prime Minister's combative style when, for instance, confronting the European Union over its decision to freeze billions in funding to Hungary over rule of law concerns.
Rule of law is there to put constraints, to put limits to political will. But recently in the European Union, rule of law became a realizing tool for frustrated political will.
Viktor Orban's Fidesz party has been in power for 14 years, Stefan. Is it fair to say that this, although not yet an existential crisis, in fact, far from it in terms of Orban, but it is the biggest crisis that he has faced so far in those 14 years?
Absolutely. This is by far the biggest crisis for Prime Minister Viktor Orban. He has been in power continuously since 2010. And obviously, the critics say he has become increasingly authoritarian in the sense that he controls a lot of media. And also there has been talks about corruption and so on. And critics say that he basically was believing that he could get away with anything. Now, obviously, one of the reasons why many Hungarians voted for him was that they quite honestly share his conservative views about families. But of course, what is very controversial is that he has quite made a case against what he views as the LGBTQ community's growing influence over schools. And he said it's very dangerous and we have to protect children. But now people say, well, you had a very big mouth about this community, which, are most of all law-abiding citizens. But now your people, and not just anyone, but even the president, are basically giving a pardon to someone who has been accused of sexual abuse against children. So it's a very big scandal. And obviously he is already preparing for his State of the Nation address. A little bit you can compare it with the State of the Union address in the United States. He does it every year. It has become a tradition.
And that's coming up this weekend, isn't it, Stefan?
Yes, it's this weekend. And of course there will be also protests. There have been also protests already before. Thousands of people demanding the resignation of the president. But of course now they are saying we also want that there are more changes made in the government, preferably that the government resigns, but if not, at least do something about the corruption, because that's another issue people are very worried about.
Finally, Stefan, in 14 years of Fidesz rule, we've never seen anything quite like this. Can you just quickly perhaps end for me by gaming out the possible implications from here on?
I think the implications will be that Orban will be very much damaged by this scandal and will face growing opposition. I have to say also that he is a very seasoned politician and he knows how to play this game very well. So I wouldn't count on it that he immediately resigns. But it is definitely a major crisis ahead of the European elections here and the rest of Europe.
Interesting times. Stefan Boss in Budapest, thank you so much for talking to me.
You're welcome.
Our Budapest correspondent, Stefan Boss there. Now, for something completely different, green comedy. Never heard of it? Well, never fear. France's Greenwashing Comedy Club are here to set you right. This group of 50 ecologically minded stand-up comedians are touring their material around France, with jokes sourced from the world of carbon footprints, wind turbines and climate change. I wonder if they recycle their material. John Lawrenson reports from Paris.
Nicolas sidles onto the stage. What does he look like? Well, that's his first line, actually. As if he shops at the organic supermarket chain Biocoop, which he almost definitely does, of course. Do we have any flexitarians here tonight, he asks. We do. He is one. What is a flexitarian? Like a vegetarian, but without the willpower. He doesn't eat meat, he explains, except in really exceptional circumstances, like when he feels like it. Raffaella is one of the comics tonight and an unofficial spokesperson of the Greenwashing Comedy Club.
So I'm Raffaella. I've started stand-up comedy about a year and a half ago. And the first skit I wrote was about my life as a Parisian girl into ecology and a bit hipster maybe, because I am. And here we are, we're playing like but like 10 times a month, in several places, mostly in Paris and in Paris area, but also a bit outside. Tomorrow I'm in Bordeaux, in southwest of France. In a few weeks I'll be in Amiens, in north of France. So yeah, we're playing a bit all around.
What is the idea of the Greenwashing Comedy Club?
So the idea, first it was founded at a time where there was not so much talks about climate and around ecology on stand-up stages, and the idea was to create a stage on which you can talk about these topics. When we're talking about climate, our goal is twofold. The first one is to plant seed in the mind of people who are not necessarily like into these topics. And that's very true when we're playing in places that are not climate labeled. And when we're playing in places that are climate labeled, as tonight, probably like 100% of the room was already convinced when they enter the room, it's more to laugh about stuff that aren't funny, and you don't laugh about eco-anxiety. So just a place to release tension.
Genre un chat, jamais de la vie. Par contre, un thon. Le ballon de rugby avec les yeux vitreux, là.
Some of the material is a little bit edgy, like Nicolas' tunophobia joke, trying to get to the bottom of the moral or otherwise choices behind his flexitarianism. He finds that he has no qualms about eating tuna, because a tuna looks like a football with glassy eyes. In fact, he wouldn't even mind kicking it about a bit. And then he says, in a few years' time, once we all think anti-speciesism is a bad thing, we'll be ashamed at laughing at that joke. It'll be like jokes about gay people. Fine a few years ago, not so now. At tonight's show, as it happens, there are quite a few jokes about gayness, but by comedians who are gay. That's a bit of an unofficial rule. You can joke about one, ecologist, lesbian, Muslim, fat person, whatever, but only if you are one. There are also some actual rules, no heckling or even verbal interaction with the comedians, for example, as the MC explains before the start. When the comedian asks the audience a question, instead of saying yes, you reply by applauding. More generally, comedians here are expected to be bienveillant, like well-meaning, i.e. have the right basic political opinions. A Greenwashing Comedy Club gig is pretty much explicitly a safe space, which Raffaella admits does have its downside.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes here it's a bit too easy, I would say. Like sometimes you're like climate and people are like ha 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 ha, and they're not laughing because you're funny. They're laughing because they agree with you. So it's good to also go outside and not to be here all the time. But it's also a good test to see if you're funny or not. If you're making a good joke, people will laugh. Maybe not as much as here because maybe they don't fully agree. Maybe sometimes there will be like some I won't say resentful, but maybe sometimes there will be a bit of tension. But yeah, eventually a good joke is a good joke.
After the show, I talked to a couple of people who'd been in the audience who were surprisingly aware of what it is they liked about this humour.
I really loved it. It was very funny. And what I loved is that every people insisted on the contradiction they have. So actually they laugh about themselves, and that's what I like. Because if you talk about ecology and you accuse other person, then it's not really funny. Because it's just accusation. And today there were a lot of people with like humans talking about their contradictions as human beings. So that's what I loved.
The fact that it is a safe space and like people some sort of have similar views on environment stuff, you can go quite far into jokes, and I thought it was like very creative.
So you can go deeper into the subject because people know the subject pretty well.
Yeah, there was this low-carbon BDSM, or there was a pig going to a Montessori school.
Yeah,
this kind of stuff. I thought it was really good. Like
okay,
some very unexpected jokes.
Though lots, of course, about the daily wrestle with green questions, like Raffaella's sketch about going on holiday with friends who aren't so green, asking her whether it's okay to throw out used coffee grounds from the coffee machine, because when we threw the eggshells away, you cried. John Lawrenson, DW, Paris.
I suspect there is a fine line between green humour and gallows humour, but we here at Inside Europe are here for it. Do drop us a line at insideeurope@dw.com if you think you have a contribution to make to this genre. I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. You're listening to Inside Europe.
Poison in the water, poison in the rain, poison in the water, but still the fact remains. You deny it ever happened, deny it ever will, deny it ever happened, but it keeps on happening still.
The politics of memory is a tricky business in Bulgaria, a Balkans nation torn between pro-Russian and pro-Western allegiances. It's in this context that the ongoing debate about what to do with Bulgaria's communist-era monuments is being carried out. Should the monuments be removed as glorifications of a repressive regime? Or should they remain as a reminder of an important part of Bulgaria's history and heritage? Opinion is divided, as Damian Vodenicharov reports from Sofia.
The monument of the Soviet Army. It is one of the most significant of its kind, and it completely dominates the downtown park it is sitting in. A large central column, over 40 meters tall, looms over the 2,000 square meter park. At the top, a Soviet soldier brandishing a machine gun leads a Bulgarian family to freedom. The Bolshevik Revolution and scenes of the Great Patriotic War, Russia's name for the Eastern Front of World War II, are also represented along the flanks of the large, temple-like structure. People started using the monument as a skate park after the fall of communism. The monument itself and the statues were often defaced in various ways. Figures were even once repainted as superheroes and supervillains such as Superman, Batman's nemesis, the Joker, and even Ronald McDonald. After the annexation of Crimea, they were painted in the colors of the Ukrainian flag. Parts of the monument were carved out or tagged with spray paint or covered with posters accusing Vladimir Putin of being a murderer. The monument itself was erected after the 1944 coup that led Bulgarian communists to overthrow the Tsar. The Red Army had just crossed the Danube into Bulgaria, which was an ally of Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. The communist regime viewed the coup as a liberation that drew it ever closer to the Soviet Union.
Bulgaria and the Soviet Union signed a friendship accord to promote cooperation and mutual aid. Historical ties between the two countries are centuries old. Our love for our great and powerful liberator and protector is deeply rooted within our souls. The friendship between the Bulgarian and Soviet peoples is eternal and unbreakable. Not only are we brothers united by blood, but also allies. The people should rejoice.
In the years following the fall of communism, some monuments were destroyed, such as the mausoleum with the body of the regime's first leader. Others were removed, such as the giant red star crowning what is today the parliament. There was talk of also removing the Soviet Army monuments, but the idea was quickly dismissed. Fast forward to December 2023, when the uppermost sculptures are being cut up in pieces and removed by crane. Cheers can be heard from the small gathered crowd, congratulating the workers. This moment was a long time coming. One of Sofia's district mayors, Traicho Traikov, was the driving force behind it back in 2022.
Този монумент има художествена.
I most certainly do not want this monument to be destroyed. It has an artistic, aesthetic and historical value. It bears witness to the times. But being displayed as it is right now in downtown Sofia, it still has the same effect that the Communist Party intended. It influences people psychologically, ideologically and politically.
Trajkov's argument is that the monument should be preserved but moved away from its original spot.
Винаги съм смятал, че трябва да се разделят двете неща.
I have always maintained that the monument should be separated. The sculptures and other elements can be moved away to a place where they can then be visited. People should be able to appreciate the art, to teach their children the history of our country, but not as it currently stands. This presence in downtown Sofia is presumptuous. It only stands for the dominance of a foreign country over a puppet state.
Public opinion is split right down the middle, not only over communist monuments, but also over ties to Russia and Bulgaria's role in the Ukraine war. To pro-Russian parties, such as the nationalists from Renaissance, removing the Soviet army monument borders on heresy. As people were gathering to protest, chants got very political very fast. As sympathizers were chanting NATO out, Renaissance President Konstantin Kostadinov, one of the main pro-Russian voices in parliament, didn't mince his words.
The current hateful government is being controlled by a fascist regime. Their goal is clear and simple. They want to wipe out all Bulgarians. They are trying to wipe Bulgaria off the map, to turn it into Ukraine. Removing the Soviet army monument in such a barbaric way says it all. They're chopping it up in pieces.
A fascist regime. The accusation is as loaded with history as the monument itself. Communists and partisan fighters before them were all fighting against what they say was the fascist regime of the Bulgarian Tsar, which was also Vladimir Putin's justification for invading Ukraine, denazification.
Damian Vodenicharov reporting from Sofia there. Now, the historical theme continues. Last week, we asked you to guess who said Europe was created by history, America was created by philosophy. Lots of you thought that it was either US President Abraham Lincoln or French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, but only the most astute of our listeners realised that the quotation was in fact from former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. This week, we're inviting you to guess the origins of the metaphor of an iron curtain to denote political division. Does it come from the 17th century British Civil War, the 18th century French guillotine, or 19th century fire safety curtains? Head over to Spotify and click on this week's episode of the show if you want to take part. Inside Europe is, of course, also available on all the other usual platforms, including YouTube via the DW Podcasts channel. This is Inside Europe. I'm Kate Laycock in Germany.